Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from the Timberwolves' exhilarating win over the Golden State Warriors, a vital win in the Western Conference playoff race. On Sunday night, the Wolves pull it out by 3 on a Karl-Anthony Towns game-winning 3 with about 10 seconds left. The story, though, was the defense for the Wolves. Naz Reid scoring throughout, Gobert's work on the glass, and yes, of course, Cat's clutch shot. We're going to break it all down on the post-game pod. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Monday, everybody. It is a Victory Monday. It's also a game day. The Wolves play again tonight, but we're going to focus today on the post-game podcast on Wolves-Warriors Sunday. A really exciting, fun game. Low scoring, but still action-packed, really fun finish. I want to break down everything about this one. Kat and Naz, especially. Kyle Anderson, a good game. The Wolves defense, impressive. All of it here on the show. First of all, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. More great local sports coverage 24/7 for free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today. Again, that's on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at my account, which is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so coming into this one, the Wolves had 3 days off, and we're kind of, the Wolves have been bouncing between the 7 and 9 spots in the West for a little while, occasionally up to 6. I don't know if they've been down to 10 in a while, but everybody's within a couple games, right? But earlier in the day, the Los Angeles Lakers and Dallas Mavericks both lost in really disappointing fashion. And the Pelicans have gotten hot here again of late, which I don't know that anybody really expected, given the Zion Williamson injury and how they looked for a while. But this was such an important game. I mean, at this point, like it's gonna I'm gonna sound like a broken record, right? Like we could say this about every single game. We now have 7 games left in the regular season, if I'm doing my quick math right. So obviously every game really, really matters. And there's no question about that. But when you see the Lakers lose, you see the Mavs lose, and you also know coming into this game, Golden State had a 2-1 lead in the season series. So if they win, they get the tiebreaker over Minnesota. But if the Wolves win this game, there is no tiebreaker, right? It's a wash in terms of head-to-head record. And the Wolves knew all of that coming into this one, actually led for most of the game. The Warriors had never had a lead of more than like a couple of possessions. I don't think at any point in this game, I'll pull that up in a second, but I think the the Warriors' largest lead was like 5 points in this game. The Warriors' largest lead was 5 points in this game. And again, the Wolves led by double figures a couple different times. Early in the game, they led by 9 early in the fourth quarter. And it just kind of kept feeling like the Warriors were going to gain control. At home, they've got such a good home record this season coming into the game. Golden State was 30-7 at home. And yet the Wolves showed complete composure and held on down the stretch. That last couple of possessions, the Wolves were losing. They were down a point, didn't score, or they were down 3. They scored. The Warriors come back the other way. Minnesota opts to not foul because they've only got the one timeout. And the calculus there is like, hey, try and get a steal. They've got a foul to give as well. And you can actually see Chris Finch. I'm curious. I didn't hear the post-game remarks. I'm curious if Finch talks to the media about whether or not they were about to start trying to foul. The Wolves had a foul to give, and it kind of looked like they were trying to give it. But instead, Draymond Green throws it away. Kyle Anderson gets a steal. And Kyle Anderson's going down the court 1-on-2, sees Gobert and Towns trailing, hits Towns in rhythm on the left wing without hesitation. Towns in rhythm, knocks down the 3, puts the Wolves up by 2. At the time they were down 1, he shoots the 3 to put them up 2. And it was a gutsy shot. I mean, like, he was in rhythm. The thought process there is it's a good shot, first of all, because he's open, obviously, right? That's why transition threes are such a good shot because you're almost out. You better be open if you're shooting a transition three. He's in rhythm. And you're losing. If it's a tie game, you obviously don't shoot there with 10 seconds left. You get you waste a couple seconds, you get closer to the rim, whatever. But you got to get the shot up there because the other thing is the Wolves are about to have numbers 3-on-2 coming back the other way, or on that end of the floor, I should say. So if Towns misses, you have an opportunity for an offensive rebound and a chance to tie the game or to take the lead that way. So shooting the ball there was absolutely the right decision. He drains it. The Wolves end up forcing a turnover on the other end after a Golden State timeout. And this to me is actually the story of the game. And it's what I want to focus on, not that play specifically, but that play was a microcosm of the Timberwolves defense all game long. And I was really impressed with how Minnesota played defensively. And the crazy thing is Jaden McDaniels played only 10 minutes in this game. He picked up 5 fouls in 10 minutes. He was on the floor, though, for that turnover that the Wolves forced on Golden State with about 4.5 seconds left, up 2, when Conley forced Jordan Poole to his left. Curry was trying to shake McDaniels. McDaniels was just blanketing him, basically face guarding him, not even turning around looking at the ball, watching wherever Curry was going. Curry went to cut, go back to the center of the floor, and Poole thought Curry was going to stay on the sideline, basically on the wing, right where the break is there. And he threw it, goes out of bounds, Timberwolves ball. But that play, and then the finish of the game, I don't want to go blow by blow here, but after a timeout, the Wolves actually ran a risky play call where McDaniels goes into the backcourt, gets the ball, he gets fouled, he makes 1 of 2 free throws, and then Curry misses a tough corner fadeaway, basically from behind the backboard, still almost made it over Anthony Edwards, and the game's over. But that play actually is another good example of it. Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, McDaniels when he was on the floor, and on that possession that the Wolves played so well to force that turnover with 4.5 seconds left. The Timberwolves' perimeter defense in this game was really, really good. They forced Steph Curry into 8 of 23 shooting, 4 of 13 outside the arc, and he wasn't just missing open shots. I mean, it's Steph Curry, right? He's been struggling a little from the field lately. He's like 30% over the last couple weeks. Curry is, but it's still Steph Curry, and he still makes open shots. The Wolves did a good job making his life difficult. Klay Thompson, 5 of 17. I think he missed 9 shots in a row at one point before hitting a really big 3 late in the fourth quarter. But both Klay and Curry, Curry, 20 points on 23 shots. Thompson, 15 points on 17 shots. They combined to shoot just 9 of 24 from 3, which isn't horrific. That's actually not all that bad at all. Klay was still 5 of 11. But Klay was 0 of 6 from 2-point range. The Wolves mucked up the middle of the floor, which they don't typically do, right? The Wolves typically struggle to contest mid-range shots because Gobert's often playing drop, and you have McDaniels and Edwards overplaying on the perimeter a lot of times, and there's kind of a no man's land that if teams take it, which is part of the reason why Jordan Poole had such a good game. Poole was just 3 of 8 outside the arc, and he was 5 of 8 inside the arc. I need to pull up his shot chart, but he did some damage in the middle of the floor, and that explains why Poole had a better game. I mean, he had 27 on 16 shots, got to the line 9 times, and the Wolves kind of struggled with him much more than they did with Steph or with Klay in this game. So, but anyway, the story really is the Wolves' perimeter defense. So they did some different things. I mean, early in the game, Gobert was playing drop, and Poole took advantage of it. Hit a couple of threes early in the game because he said, okay, hey, Rudy Gobert, if you're going to drop, I'm going to do damage in the middle. And sure enough, Poole hit 2 mid-range shots. He was 2 of 2 between the paint and the arc, and he was 3 of 6 inside the paint. But most of those were outside the restricted area. He hit a couple of shots that were 10, 12 feet away. And wasn't like at the rim making shots. Jordan Poole wasn't. So that's why Poole, but he did draw a bunch of fouls, right? He got to the line. What was he? 8 of 9 from the free throw line, I think. Yeah, 8 of 9 from the line in this game. So Poole was the one that did the damage because he was very comfortable shooting from the mid-range. He was comfortable getting to the free throw line. Curry and Thompson each shot 0 free throws in this game. They combined for 0 free throw attempts. Of course, that's not their game, right? Golden State doesn't get to the line a ton. That's one of the reasons why I said this in Friday's show when I previewed this matchup way back on Friday, that because the Warriors don't get to the line that often and the Wolves foul a lot, I actually don't hate the Warriors-Wolves matchup. And sure enough, the Wolves have split the season series against Golden State, and use their size advantageously against Golden State. The Wolves were a plus 12 on the glass in this game. We'll talk more about that next segment here. But at any rate, the perimeter defense, the drop coverage early, the Wolves kind of shifted away from that. They did a little more switching, and the Warriors were trying to hunt that pick and roll matchup with Rudy Gobert to try and get him in isolation, basically on an island. And it worked a couple of times. They got a couple baskets. Curry hit a tough mid-range baseline jumper over the outstretched arm of Rudy Gobert. But anytime the Warriors went to like a double drag screen, or if they tried to stagger screens, the Wolves tried to get Kyle Anderson or Anthony Edwards or Taurean Prince or Mike Conley. They tried to get those guys involved in the middle of it so they could switch and not end up with Gobert in space on Steph Curry. Or even, they tried to avoid that with Towns and with Naz Reid. But Towns and Reid actually did really good guarding on the perimeter as well. I was really impressed with both of those guys and how they move their feet. But perimeter defense, schematically, very, very good defense from the Wolves in this game. I mean, anytime you hold Steph and Clay to 0 free throws, hold them to, they both had more field goal attempts than they did points in this game. Extremely impressive from the Timberwolves on defense. I want to talk about a couple other takeaways from this one. A couple individual takeaways, and then also rebounding, et cetera. And then we'll get into individual studs and duds here at the end of the show. So we're going to get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. If you had taken Naz Reid points over, well, I don't know, maybe not, because Naz has had some great games against Golden State this year, but I think you would have been in good shape. Naz actually led the Wolves in points in this game. If you're not familiar with Prize Picks, it's really easy to play, and it's a ton of fun. You just pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. Of course, that includes the NBA. What's left of college basketball over the next couple of weeks as well, or I guess the next week. MLB is about to start up, NHL ongoing. All that stuff, you can find it on Prize Picks. Your entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It really is that easy. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Okay, a couple additional things. I mentioned the Jaden McDaniels foul trouble earlier. This was the worst McDaniels game in a long time. I mean, he scored 1 point, and it was that free throw at the end. And if he had hit both those, he would have sealed the game. He only hit one. He was actually 1 of 4 at the line in this game. McDaniels was 10 minutes. He grabbed a single rebound, committed 5 fouls, and was goaded into some fouls, committed a couple of offensive fouls, got a technical. It just was the worst McDaniels game we've seen probably since the fall. And he had a couple of bad ones early this season, but we've seen so much growth from him of late. And of course, this is also the first game we've seen Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards on the floor since the week after Thanksgiving when Cat got hurt against Washington. So there's going to be a bit of kind of a readjustment to the pecking order, if you will. And I'm not saying that's what it was here. Obviously, foul trouble was the main issue, but there may be a bit of a learning curve here for McDaniels. And I thought the Wolves handled it well. I mean, Taurean Prince only played 14 minutes, but that's because the Wolves just really leaned into playing gigantic. And Chris Finch said as much after the last game, the win against Atlanta, when Finch talked about like, hey, we got to play the best players. And Naz was great in this game, so he's going to play. And sure enough, Towns played 32 minutes. Gobert played 34. Naz Reid played 21. And with foul trouble to McDaniels, Kyle Anderson played 32. And the Wolves just played a massive lineup. Prince, in fact, had the least minutes of anyone that played for the Wolves. Alexander Walker had 16, McLaughlin 15, Taurean Prince 14. And it's not anything Taurean did. It's just simply the Wolves were playing as big as they possibly could. And you ended up with a 4x5 game, if you will, from Kyle Anderson, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, and 5 steals off the bench for Anderson. Just an invaluable player for the Wolves. And not just in instances like this when McDaniels gets into foul trouble, but he's really important in instances like this when McDaniels gets into foul trouble, because he's not the same he's not the same level of one-on-one defender as Jaden McDaniels is, certainly. But he's a really good team defender, and he's a passable perimeter defender on ball, and switchable, even with his lack of athleticism, but because of his sheer size, his basketball IQ, and he can still move laterally well enough to guard a lot of perimeter players. And he was really, really important in this game. Kyle Anderson was. But all that to say, the point here is the Wolves papered over losing McDaniels to foul trouble early and often in this game very, very well, with Kyle Anderson playing gigantic with Naz Reid. Be interested to go back and look at the actual, like, who was on the court at what point with whom, and who played who played what amount of minutes with which player, etc. Because the Wolves just played massive all game long. So I was really impressed with how the Wolves handled that. Secondly, on the glass, the Timberwolves were fantastic, and Golden State isn't like world beaters on the glass. I'm going to pull up exactly what their numbers are uh, to this point in the season on the glass, but this was all about just simply being a lot bigger than the other team, and it's not going to win. That's not going to work 10 times out of 10, right? We've seen that early in the season, right? But the Warriors, they're actually middle of pack rebounding. They're 14th in defensive rebound rate. They're 16th in offensive rebound rate. But like I said earlier, they don't draw fouls. They don't shoot a lot of 2-pointers. They don't get into the paint a lot. And the Wolves were happy to dominate the paint and the glass in this game. Minnesota was a plus 12 on the glass. They had 9 offensive rebounds to only 6 for Golden State. For the game, the Timberwolves were a plus 6 points in the paint. The Wolves shot the ball so well from the perimeter. And give Golden State credit, they actually defended the paint really well. They did a good job on Cat. They did a good job on Rudy. And Gobert had a weird game. Like, he had 10 and 18. He only attempted 3 shots. He was 8 of 12 at the free throw line, hit 1 of 2 big free throws at the end when the Wolves were down, to keep them down 1 instead of down 2. That was the possession just prior to when Kyle Anderson got the steal. Gobert missed the front end of the free throws. He actually, I didn't talk about this earlier, but Gobert sealed Draymond below the rim, and Towns made a really nice bullet pass into Rudy with what could have been a dunk because of the position that Rudy had. Draymond wisely fouled Gobert. Gobert misses the front end, makes the second. The Wolves are down 1, and then that led into the Anderson steal, Cat 3, Warriors turnover, etc. But Gobert, by only shooting the ball 3 times, this is a good example of a game that I don't want to say he controlled the game, but he really impacted. And it's funny because Golden State doesn't go to the basket that often. They don't get to the line that often. They only shot 17 free throws in this game. Steph and Clay didn't shoot free throws. It was really just Jordan Poole. But yet Gobert's presence clearly had an impact on what Golden State was trying to do offensively. And he grabbed 18 rebounds. He had half as many rebounds in this game as the Warriors team did. The Warriors had 37 rebounds. Gobert had 18 rebounds himself in 34 minutes. And that was significant. That was a really important piece of this game, was controlling the paint and controlling the glass. And Gobert was a big part of that. And I also should say Naz Reid too. We'll talk more about him here in a minute. But Naz was part of that. Like, he rebounded the ball better than he typically does. I thought Kyle Anderson, of course, had the 10 rebounds I mentioned earlier. Cat, again, was relatively quiet on the glass, relatively quiet overall, but a good Karl-Anthony Towns game, given all the circumstances. I was generally impressed with how he played as well. And really, in general, Cat and Ant, neither of them found a rhythm, and they both really, a lot of their points just came on open jumpers. Like, Towns was 4 of 9 from 3. In fact, 12 of his 14 points just came on threes. He didn't have a single free throw attempt. He was only 1 of 7 on 2-point attempts. And his threes were all except maybe one corner 3 were just open jumpers. Ant, both of his 3-point makes were wide open jumpers. The other ones were mostly contested. He was 2 of 8 from 3. So when the Wolves were able to generate those open looks for their best players, of course, they hit the open shots. But offensively, Golden State's this season, their defense isn't what it typically has been. But they have had injury issues, and Draymond was healthy, and Steph's been playing solid defense, and they made things difficult on the Wolves. And it was a lot of Naz Reid. We'll talk more about him here in a minute. It was a little bit of, Ants and Cat here and there. Mike Conley early in the game hit 4 early threes and finished with 12 points on those 4 early threes. But this was just a well-balanced offensive attack, I guess, is maybe the nicest way to say it for the Wolves. All right, let's get to individual studs and duds. I want to talk a lot of Naz Reid here in a minute. We'll take a peek at the standings as well, so we're going to do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Built Bar. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know that you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for anything cookie dough, anything with, brownie batter also is one of my favorites. Anything with cookie dough or brownies, brownie chunk as well are my absolute favorites. Make sure to go vote for your favorite bar, support your team, and support your bar or puff. When you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. And not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You have to try Built. Built is the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing you won't even think that they're good for you. What makes Built bars and puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from this game. We have to start with Naz Reid. We talked a little about him earlier, but he needs to be talked about more. He had 23 off the bench in just 21 minutes. He actually was like 9 of his first 12, and then I think he went 1 for 5 to close the game. But he was so good in the first half, hit some big shots as the Warriors were kind of making hay in the late third, early fourth quarter. Naz shot 10 of 17 overall from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, including a big corner 3 late, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, only 1 turnover, had a +8, which was tied, or which was the, I guess, the third best plus minus individually on the team in this game. Just a really well-rounded Naz game. And he had 30 against Golden State. I think it was the last time the Wolves played the Warriors. Both games that Cat missed and the Wolves played the Warriors. Wolves won 1, lost 1. And Naz was great. I don't know what it is about playing Golden State. Man, maybe he's trying to get that free agent deal with them this offseason. But Naz was fantastic. 23 and 6, 10 of 17 shooting. Very good defensively again. I said this earlier. I was really impressed with both Naz and Cat moving their feet, staying with Steph, staying with Jordan Poole for the most part, staying with Clay around screens, fighting through stuff. If they got stuck in isolation, they move their feet. I haven't seen Naz defend in space this well. I mean, last game, he had those 2 late steals on Trae Young, just getting in passing lanes, clogging things up, sticking his massive wingspan in passing lanes, deflecting passes with the back of his hand, just activity stuff that I don't ever remember seeing from Naz Reid, even earlier this season, but especially the last couple of years. The full game for Naz Reid is really rounding into form. Again, defending in space, not something you want Naz doing all the time, but he's nimble enough to do it. He's athletic enough to do it. He's certainly big enough, long enough to do it. And he was a big contributor in this game. Nobody else scored more than 14 points for the Wolves, and Naz had 23 in just 21 minutes off the bench. He was 6th in minutes played for the Wolves, 1st in points scored. He was also 1st in field goal attempts, but he was relatively efficient. 3 of 5 outside the arc, right? I mean, just a really good Naz Reid game. And it's so important when Cat, Rudy can't get a shot off. He was fouled a bunch, but the Wolves couldn't get anything going for Rudy in this game again. Cat, his shot looked a little rusty at times in this game, and of course he had the big shot late. But they need Naz, and I was dead wrong about him at the start of the season. I did not think he would be this big of a part of the rotation. And who knows, if Cat hadn't gotten hurt, he maybe would not have been. But big game for Naz for sure. Kyle Anderson, I said this earlier, a 4x5 game, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals, and a block for Kyle Anderson. 5 of 10 shooting, 1 of 3 outside the arc, 1 of 2 at the line. Only 2 turnovers for Anderson in 32 minutes. Had the game, the game-saving steal that led to the game-winning basket for Kyle Anderson. I mentioned earlier, he did a good job on the perimeter, getting put in tough situations, sticking with the Warriors' ball movement, sticking with the Warriors' ball handlers. Just a quintessential Kyle Anderson, hey, I'm going to be in the right place at the right time. I'm going to do whatever you ask of me. In this case, it was, he moves back to the bench for the first time in a long time, ends up playing 32 minutes because of the foul trouble for Jaden McDaniels, and plays extremely well. There's so many ways we could describe this, so many superlatives for Kyle Anderson. It's a Swiss Army knife. It was a professional game. All that stuff is true. He was the just such an important piece of this win. And we could have said that after we did say it after the last win too, right? But such a good game for him too. Last stud has to be Karl-Anthony Towns. I know that the 5 of 16 isn't pretty, but 4 of 9 outside the arc is better than he shot the ball earlier this year pre-injury. Remember, he was 33% before the injury. And of course, the game winner. And before that, he hit another big 3 just a couple possessions before that, actually, when the Wolves were kind of trying to hang with the Warriors, blow for blow. I think it was right after that big Clay 3 from the left wing. The Wolves ran, I can't remember what it was exactly. I know Conley set the screen, but Towns popped. Is one of those plays they like to run where Towns can pop out outside the arc, top of the key, drains the 3. I mean, 2 clutch threes. This is a game after hitting the clutch free throws against Trae Young and the Hawks. It's Cat's number is 14, 5, 3, and 2. Like, okay, great. 5 of 16 shooting. You want to see more if you're just looking at the box score. But Cat was clutch in this game, and he seems ready for the moment. And he wants the ball in those situations. It's so much fun to watch him go to work down, late in games and be very comfortable doing it. The only dud for me for this game is Jaden McDaniels, and just a bad game for Jaden. I already talked about it earlier. 1 of 4 at the line, 10 minutes played, 1 point, 0 of 2 shooting. I should also say it was huge. He hit the second free throw late after missing the one. Like, it was big. He hit that, put them up 3, obviously. But 5 fouls in 10 minutes, technical at a bad time. Like, just not a good game for Jaden. But, it happens. All right, Western Conference standings. The Timberwolves are alone in 7th place, just a half game behind Golden State, and now there is no tiebreaker. Golden State has played one more game than the Wolves. They've won that game, so the Wolves are tied in the loss column, one behind in the win column to Golden State. Minnesota is also a half game up on the Pelicans. They have split the season series so far with New Orleans. The last game of the season is against the Pels. That could be really significant because that could be for the tiebreaker, and at the moment, the Pels are only a half game behind Minnesota. Minnesota's a full game up on the Lakers plus the tiebreaker, a full game up on the Thunder plus the tiebreaker, 2 games up now on the Mavericks, who have sunk all the way to 11th after losing twice to Charlotte in the last few days. 2 games plus the tiebreaker up on Dallas. Minnesota's only a game behind the Clippers, and they have that tiebreaker. So if LA loses their next game and the Wolves win, and say Golden State loses, the Wolves move all the way up to 5th, and at the moment, they're only a game and a half behind Phoenix, which makes the Wolves-Suns game this week that much bigger. We're not going to preview Wolves-Kings Monday right now, but that's what we have Monday night. We'll, of course, do the live postcast about 45 minutes after Wolves-Kings, even though it'll be late in the Twin Cities after midnight when we go live. And then Wolves-Suns on Wednesday. 2 massive games in the Western Conference this week for the Wolves. So make sure you're following and subscribe to this show wherever you listen to podcasts. A big thank you to those that do make it your first listen every day. Of course, we'll have the postgame pod, like I said, Monday night. We'll do the full postgame pod for Tuesday. So it's all upcoming, full coverage all week long. A huge, huge week in Wolves land. Of course, you can listen to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube and the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. That's all we have for you today. A big thank you for listening. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now you can make your second listen to Game to Game NBA podcast every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.